Yeah, trauma-informed is really about not re-traumatizing people, right? A lot of people have PTSD and they've had a rough go with nutrition. Perhaps there's been a lot of adverse childhood experiences or adverse food-related experiences. There's parents who stigmatize and shame their kids, or ways that they've been punished or rewarded with food. A lot of people just have a lot of charge around food. So oftentimes when we try to intervene with nutrition, it can be triggering for people. It can be re-traumatizing, and it drives a lot of people away from seeking nutritional help. So when we say trauma-informed nutrition therapy, we're thinking about messaging nutrition in a way that's safe, neutral, recognizes people's strengths rather than stresses personal responsibility, doesn't recreate a feeling of personal failure. It's designed to lift people up and empower them to feel like they're accessing their best self. And it also understands all the biological impacts of trauma. Trauma affects our physiology, it affects our gut, it affects our stress response, it affects our immune system. And we need to use nutrition to help heal these systems. So there's so much we can do with nutrition to someone that's had a lot of trauma. But one of the most important things is to use language and use messaging and use energy that doesn't run the risk of re-traumatizing them. It means that we're going to educate people about nutrition and wellness and focus on the positive aspects rather than the negative aspects. There's a lot of nutrition information that's out there that tells people what not to eat and gives people rules and gives them a lot of charge around food. And one of the unintended consequences is that they start doing extreme dieting, and it turns into binging, purging, restricting, over-exercising. So one of the sad, unfortunate consequences of a lot of nutrition information is that people end up with disordered eating. So an eating disorder informed nutrition program is going to focus on telling people things to do rather than what not to do, right? So it doesn't impose any rigid rules. It's not about starting a new diet. It's about embodying guiding principles that are individual and personal that people can really take on their own wellness journey. There's too many rules out there with nutrition. So we give people guiding principles that they choose rather than rigid rules. And therefore we don't run the risk of getting people wrapped up in any extreme behaviors. Eating disorders are the worst possible outcome of any nutrition intervention. And I've spent 10 years working one-on-one with people who have a wide range of eating disorders. And the Wise Mind Nutrition program is designed to be eating disorder friendly. It's not triggering. It will not put people in a tight spot where they run the risk of developing a new disorder. It's a hot topic. It's controversial, a lot of charge. I've been writing about it for many years. If you look at some of my peer-reviewed publications, a lot of them have to do with food addiction, sugar addiction, but really putting it in the context of eating disorders. So a lot of people with food addiction want to know, what do I do about it? And I think there's an assumption that people have to get into some really rigid diets and get into weighed and measured food plan and get into something that's focused on losing weight. And I've helped a lot of people recover from food addiction without being super rigid about food. Sure, they might need to become abstinent about certain behaviors or perhaps around certain foods, but it doesn't have to be so mathematical and so rigid and so pass-fail. One of the reasons food addiction has such a bad rep is because people do this on the wagon, off the wagon thing, and they end up getting worse sometimes because they're binging, dieting. There's a way to use food to help heal the neurobiology of addiction and to think about it as a recovery program without making it a rigid pass-fail thing. So yes, Wise Mind Nutrition is the perfect program for someone that has a food addiction but doesn't feel like rigid approaches are right for them. There's a lot of causes of binge eating disorder. I think it's important to first say that eating disorders are considered mental health diagnoses, and they're diagnosed because they cause impairment and distress. They actually impact someone's quality of life. So it's not just about overeating. It's about overeating in a way that brings guilt, shame, remorse, and disrupts daily functioning. So some people binge because they simply don't eat enough during the day. They restrict, they skip breakfast, they skip lunch, and then shocker, by 10 p.m., right, they're hungry. A lot of people binge because they have problems regulating their emotions. Perhaps they have a lot of unresolved trauma and some difficulties with daily stressors, and that plays out in their relationship to food. Food is actually quite rewarding. So some people have a addiction-like relationship when it comes to binging. Some people have a lot of difficulties getting past stuff in early childhood. Sometimes we have stuff that happens in our families that persists over our lifespan and we don't even know it. Some people binge because there's opportunity, there's emotions involved like loneliness or boredom, and food is so easy to get nowadays, right? You can hit an app and have whatever you want within a few minutes. So binge eating doesn't have one cause. There's a lot of factors that cause people to binge. And what we do at Wise Mind Nutrition is get to the root of it and figure out what's true for you and figure out what recovery needs to look like. Recovery is individual and personal. Don't ever let anyone superimpose their definition of recovery on you. We're gonna find out your truth and help you move into a new chapter with grace and dignity.